Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our future work session. Today we have a great guest, Artin Arabshai. He's one of our own graduates from 2013. And since he graduated, he's been doing different things from joining the tech industry, venture capital industry. Now he's joined a startup, a lot of exciting things. He's also a member of our National Board of Advisors. So I meet with him regularly, get his advice on a number of initiatives that we have in the business school. We thought he would be a perfect person to talk about the future work because in a sense, he embraced that since he graduated. So welcome, Martin. And to get us started, I'd like you to reflect back on what you've been doing since you graduated, and then I'll start asking you more questions.
Sounds good. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. This is exciting. Maybe one of the silver linings of the last year and a half is that we get to do stuff like this in a virtual way and connect. So thank you. I liked that you said I started my career in the future of work. So I guess, I'm trying to come up with a back to the future joke. So I graduated from Eller in 2013. I did the a finance major and the entrepreneurship program. And since then, have been, in tech the entire time, both as an investor and as an operator. My first year out of undergrad, and actually my last year during undergrad, I was helping launch the LA market of a business called Built-In. So I would come out to LA a few days a month, and the running joke was that Built-In LA was a Chicago headquartered company and run by an Arizona guy. But that was kind of how I got in the weeds during my senior year. I got to know that company because I had spent the summer between junior and senior year working at Techstars in Chicago. And that came together from a bunch of cold emails that I sent my junior year. So from Eller, went to Techstars, then was back my senior year doing Built-In LA. And the plan was graduate, move to LA and keep running with Built-In LA, which was an online kind of media site and jobs board for the tech industry in LA. And as I was getting ready to graduate, I actually got to know a venture capitalist quite well. And he approached me about venture capital and asked if I'd ever thought about it. And, in hindsight, I got incredibly lucky just to build that relationship. And it was one of many investors that I got to know during that time frame. And he approached me about it. I told him that I had never really thought about venture capital until recently, and I didn't think of it as like a path that I would pursue, or it wasn't something, no one tells you how to exactly become a venture capitalist. And so I just kind of asked him for more information and all that stuff, and I ended up applying and ended up joining him at that firm. That would have been right after I finished undergrad. And I ended up spending about 7 years doing venture capital. I worked with him for 5 years across 2 different firms. We started a firm called Fika Ventures together. And then after Fika, I was at a firm called Wonderco for about 2 years. And almost a year ago now, I left the investing world and I joined a startup called Route as the VP of strategy. And so now I'm back on the inside of building businesses again, but after a decent amount of time as an investor.
And that's a amazing experience, right? Because you jump to the other side and you learn how to invest and how to evaluate ventures. Now back running a company. So from the venture capital point of view, when evaluating a new company or startup, how do you look at these concepts of workforce, in the workplace? I mean, you already mentioned that you're running the Built-In LA, being in Arizona, so geography is not relevant, right? So that kind of eliminates the idea of workplace.
Yeah.
I just wanted you to talk about what's going on out there in that ecosystem.
Definitely. Yeah. And I mean, I think obviously with the COVID pandemic, it accelerated a lot and it changed quite a lot, right? I mean, nowadays I work in e-commerce and looking at the statistics of, e-commerce growth in 2020 worldwide is obviously pretty tremendous. And you can apply that across a lot of different things, including remote work and work culture and all that type of stuff. And so I think the thing that is interesting, I was just talking to a friend about this today. The shift to remote work, I think, was actually a lot easier than everyone expected, particularly thanks to, great companies like Zoom. I think what's going to be really interesting is actually the shift back is proving to be a little more complicated. I'm seeing it with many of my friends who run companies where it's like, okay, during the pandemic, everything was remote. So someone moved to Texas and someone moved to Arizona and, but we're a California company. And so now everyone's starting to talk about, well, okay, how do we bring everyone back, or do we accept remote? And what's been really interesting is there's kind of been two things that I see coming up a lot. One is just like, what type of culture do people want to set? And there's some companies where they're like, no, we want to be in person. Like, that's our culture. Obviously, the last year has shown remote flexibility is fine, right? If you got to go to the doctor or take care of your kid or whatever, like no one's going to, I don't think anyone's ever going to question that again or have any issues with that. But it's more of the, will you be fully remote supported? And I think the thing that's holding people back on that front is actually more of a structural one. And it's a structural, like, logistics question of legal and compliance and HR and payroll and all that stuff. And so I'm seeing companies pop up now that are helpful to that, where it's like, hey, this is a business that specializes in remote payroll or remote workforce and all that stuff. And they're having a great year. So I think that is part of the future, but I also think that this year has proven and shown that remote only, it worked well for some people, but it's not for everybody, myself included. I love the flexibility, and don't get me wrong, working from home a few days a week or even like a week a month, or being able to travel and work for 2 weeks at a time, like, that's all great. But I am such an extrovert. I miss being in the space with people and forming the human connection in 3 dimensions instead of 2. So I think that's a little bit of what we're seeing on our end.
Tell me about, we talked about COVID, people working from home. I don't know if you already have joined the route as a strategy person at the time, or you're still doing the investment. How do you see that ecosystem? How did it go through COVID? The investments continue, the ideas continue to flow, or there was a slowdown and different types of things happen?
It's a good question. So in my current role, I'm not doing much investing myself, but I obviously spent enough time there, and enough of my friends are there, and I still have a pretty active involvement in some of my prior firms and stuff like that. So definitely seeing a lot of what's going on. What's interesting is, like, I think back to March of 2020, while I was still an investor full time. And I remember the beginning of the pandemic, just like everybody, March felt like every day, every week, there were different waves. Everyone was trying to figure out everything. And then we kind of got into this cadence where it's been, a year and some change now. And like, the normalcy caught up to us. But I remember in March, I probably spent almost all of my time on the phone with existing portfolio company CEOs. And I think over the course of my career, I've invested in about 100 companies now. And, not all of them wanted to talk to me, but probably 30 or 40 called. And we had conversations where I was like, okay, well, cash management, like, where are you with your balance sheet? When PPP came out, there was a whole question of, do venture-backed startups apply for that? Is that something that's both, structurally what we're supposed to do, but also morally what we're supposed to do? And I remember every week it was a different conversation. The first week was, how do we figure out work from home? The second week was, what's our cash position? The third week was these government kind of loans. And then, the fourth week was really the first week where it felt like people could actually start thinking to the future again, instead of just like survival. And what's funny is, there's this famous, or now infamous, memo that I think it was Sequoia Capital put out. And it was all about, hunker down and get ready for this crazy year. And, the weirdness, particularly in tech in this last year, is that the the bifurcation of the economy that we're seeing in so many different ways, and like a K-shaped recovery is very strongly shown in the fact that tech was already capable of a lot of remote friendly environments in a way that I don't think otherwise or other industries had as easily set up. And so all this to say, I think it took about a month or two for people to get comfortable, but then very quickly people realized, oh, I can make an investment over Zoom, or I can do a partnership over Zoom, or I can, later into the pandemic, as people started, as more data came out around health and guidelines and things like that, and it was like, oh, okay, well, we can do 70% over Zoom, and then the last 30% will meet and go on a walk outside or sit across, a room from each other in open air. Like it became this really interesting thing where people started to adapt just like humans always do. And I think tech, in many ways was the beneficiary of a lot of that because it was already a bit ahead of that curve. And so on the investment front specifically, I think that 2020 and even the start of 2021 is maybe some of the craziest investment pace I've ever seen, and that's separate from COVID in a lot of ways. But like I started investing in 2012, 2013, and I always joked that I was a VC for like the easiest time that it's ever been to be a VC, because like it's been an up market for almost a decade, and like I remember thinking, well, this can't go on, and then the Trump tax plan, kind of grew the markets, in a pretty direct way, given they, so much capital was reshored and all that type of stuff. And then obviously COVID impacted the market super negatively. And then quickly afterwards, it became really clear that the government stimulus is going to keep the markets not only alive, but thriving and growing. And a lot of that is concentrated within tech. And so, not to have a deep markets conversation, but it is really interesting to just see that like we're on a 9-year upswing, and it's crazy that the pandemic made that continue to grow. And I don't know where it stops. I don't know where it plateaus. I don't know if 6 to 12 months from now, we're all looking at it and being like, well, stimulus is over and the economy is built on a house of cards. Yeah. But then you see all the other money that's coming from all around the world into tech and private equity and venture capital. And I do think that this industry at least continues to be propped up, for better or for worse.
Yeah. Very interesting dynamic. So for a while, uncertainty, but then things settle down and continue to ramp up, right? And now I look at the tech sector. Most of the companies and solutions are towards more of what I call smart automation of everything, right? Of how you shop, how you learn, how you do the work. And so we are moving more towards these kind of systems where you have technology, smart automation, and the human beings, right? So from an education point of view, I think about, well, we can teach the accounting skills, the marketing skills, but or the technology skills. But a lot of that is going to be automated, right? That's what the tech industry proposes over and over, right? And which are high speed all the time. So, what do you think people are going to need to be successful managers, executives, employees when you have this combination of technology and human systems?
Yeah. And I think, Paulo, I think you and I both enjoyed the same book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution. I think a couple of years ago we were talking about that. But, yeah. I'm an optimist in many ways. I think that there's a couple things here, though. Like one is, yes, I think like things like AI and machine learning and application-based kind of automation will spare a lot of kind of the redundant work that people spend time on right now. I think that the way my optimism kicks in, though, is actually that I think that people maybe overestimate how much AI is going to actually do. And I think that work kind of shifts and moves, and technology compounds it in ways where there will be a requirement for different skills. And so, my general sense on that is that people will different skills will be like the key benefit or the key requirements, but that doesn't mean that there won't be extra work to do, right? So like, it's like, I don't know, pouring water into a bag or something like that. The water takes shape of the bag, right? And I think that that's kind of how we'll see the economy evolve too, just like it always has. For me, some of those skills are I really do think some of the soft skills are things that and it's a very weird thing to think about for institution of higher ed, because where exactly does that come into play and stuff like that. But I do think that there's probably two areas that I feel I would be spending my time if I was in college now. One is kind of like specific technical talent, and I don't mean go learn how to be a software engineer. I mean like learn how to use Tableau or some of those tools that I know we've talked about, or learn how to become an expert at social media, paid marketing, or really like specific technical things where it's like, yes, automation can help that over time, but also like those are tools, like that's not going away anytime soon, and the whole economy is built on it right now. And then the other piece is just like domain expertise and kind of relationship management, where it's like, at the end of the day, people are still going to work at companies, and people are still going to need to communicate with each other and have process in place. And, if you're an expert in a certain field, no matter the level, there's meaningful value that comes from that. So I don't know, that those are, if you had asked me a year ago, I probably had a better polished answer for you, but that's some of the stuff that I'm just thinking about these days.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the domain knowledge is going to continue to be very important, like in healthcare or retail or supply chain, right? You need to understand the domain. And then that combination of technical skills that are relevant. So I think I would agree with you. A few years ago, when you started to have all these new companies based on what we call the two-sided platform, like Uber, or you match up consumers and the providers, right, or Airbnb, and then the gig economy surfaced, right?
Yep.
And the gig economy is a different type of workforce. How do you see that moving forward? You're going to see more people embracing this kind of on-demand type of workforce?
So I've got I actually have a lot of thoughts on this, so I'll try to keep it. I'll keep it somewhat concise, but because for the longest time, a major area of my focus as an investor was on marketplaces. So I actually went really, really deep in this, and a lot of the investments I've done over the years has been in marketplaces of varying degree, both on demand and B2B marketplaces and B2C marketplaces. I've kind of gone across the whole spectrum on it, but I think probably there's a couple things I'd call out. One is, to your point, I think flexible work is here to stay. And I think that right now and over time, and as they've grown and some of these companies as they've gotten bigger, the flexible work kind of gig economy has taken on a negative connotation in a lot of ways. And I think that like you see that in some of these larger organizations that like, don't necessarily pay the workers well, or don't, a 1099 worker versus a W-2 worker doesn't come with benefits and things like that. Like there's a lot of flaws with the structure today. And so I'll come to that in a second. But I think when you think about the benefits for the worker themselves, when it comes to people who say like, oh, I love that I can drive for Uber or Lyft or DoorDash or Instacart or whatever in between, my studies or in between other stuff I'm doing, or even supplement it if I'm trying to save up for something. Like, I think those things are actually real value that we maybe at this point have stopped giving as much credence to as we would have like 3-4 years ago. So I do feel that way personally when it comes to the gig economy. Is something that actually is really flexible work, which when you think about it, flexible work is something that knowledge workers have had for a long time, but more manual workers have not necessarily had for a long time, or service workers. And so I actually think there is something really wonderful about kind of creating flexible work in non-knowledge work kind of economies. That said, I think that the structure of W-2 and 1099 and no in between is totally broken. And so this is like a bit of a more political take on this, but I personally think that I'm not an expert in this, and I haven't gone deep enough into like the structure and the nuts and the bolts, but I do think that there should probably be a third classification of employee, one where it is flexible and you are able to have flexible hours and kind of, things like that, that the 1099 kind of gig economy provides, but that, the employers are still held accountable for paying livable wages and some sort of premium when it's benefits or expenses that are related to the work. And so I have a personal ambition at some point, if I hope someone beats me to it, but I do think that there should really be a strong movement towards creating a third class of workforce that gives some of the benefits of a W-2 employee to some of the 1099 workers, because I think there's really pros and cons to both sides. And I think there's a beautiful middle ground we need. And I think that policy is not caught up to economy in that way.
Yeah. And that's an interesting concept, the third kind of in between kind of a category of workers. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's just like, if you work a certain number of hours, or if you as an employer tell the gig economy workers what time they're supposed to work, like things like there are things that they can't do because it encroaches on what a 1099 worker has, and both sides have misused that kind of those different things. And I think overall, like, we're in a capitalistic economy that without proper bounds will reach all the way to the extremes. And that's what we're seeing now when it comes to the gig economy, is some of these companies, a handful of tech companies, have gotten massive on kind of the backs of a lot of these workers that signed up for it because of the flexibility, but then it started to slip into other things that are a lot more onerous, and sometimes, like, I don't think any of the companies acted with strong malintent or malicious or anything like that. But, there are some of those programs where, like, some of the ride sharing companies offered car leases that had like insane interest rates on the car leases, and you could really only pay it off by driving more. And like, there were things like that like, clearly there is something that needs to be fixed. But I don't think that gig economy flexible work is going away. I think it just has to be improved.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's not going to go away because there are many advantages for the worker, right? And you have to think about that angle as well. So before we end, I would really like to ask you about your new company, Route, what it is, and what do you do as the chief strategist?
Yeah, totally. So couple of good questions. I mean, on the high level, the business itself is we're there to really try to help smaller online retailers compete with the likes of Amazon, and we do it in a lot of different ways. But at its core, right now, we have kind of two main products in the market. One is a product that consumers can add at the point of purchase. So when they're buying from an e-commerce site, they can add Route, and what we do with that is we basically help them have purchasing experience that is similar to Amazon Prime. And what I mean by that is not the shipping side, not like the 2-day delivery thing, but if anything goes wrong, so if it's lost, damaged, or stolen, we'll help you replace your product or get a refund. And Route will actually cover kind of the cost on your behalf. And so that's kind of our core thing right now. And brands love it because when those things go wrong today, they have to kind of they usually are covering that cost themselves or having to deal with the customer support. So when Route can kind of step in, we give the consumer a better experience, and we give the merchant the ability to kind of do that at scale in a way that is pretty, seamless. And then the other product that we have in market is a free consumer app called Route. Everyone should download. And what we do with Route on the app side is we help you track all of your e-commerce orders all in one place. And so with that, if you choose to integrate with your email, you can, or if it's just the merchants that are in our network and Amazon, which you should also log in with, we'll basically tell you like, hey, your package is on its way. It's out for delivery. It's going to arrive. But our value there is kind of as a Switzerland model, where we're like, hey, we'll help you aggregate all of your online orders, not just Amazon or not just from these retailers or whatever. So those are the two things that we kind of have in market right now that have been exciting and going well. And then my role, in particular, I work really closely with our CEO on kind of a plethora of things, to be honest. Like I think depending on the week or the day, my time goes to different things, but it's everything from executive kind of recruiting to strategic partnerships, to fundraising and investor relations, given my background there. And over time, that's kind of evolving a little bit more and more. Just I've been around like 7 months at the company now, and the business is only about 2 years old. So it's definitely like a bit of a kind of jack of all trades type role, but I'm learning a ton, having a blast being back on kind of the inside and riding the roller coaster of company building.
That sounds very exciting. And knowing you, I think you're probably enjoying that ride, right? The roller coaster ride.
Well, I've already lost all my hair, so I don't. It's now moved down to my face, and then I'm gonna just lose it all. But I am. Yeah, it's been a real blast. For anyone who's thinking about the balance or the choices between investing and operating, it's funny because I always felt like something was missing when I was an investor. I really wanted to be back in like the weeds and just like have the high highs and the low lows, and then as an operator, you get that, right? Like every day feels different, but like that's what I wanted. I wanted that experience again. I'm kind of addicted to the pace of it. And it's all part of a journey. For me, it's just like, I'm in constant pursuit of kind of learning and experience and trying to just get better wherever I can. And I think that, I reached a point as an investor where I felt like I was getting really good. I was gaining expertise, which was amazing, but I feel like I was too young and too early in my career to be the expert. I wanted to kind of be the student again for a while.
Yeah. Always challenging your comfort zone, right? Always going that extra mile.
For better or worse.
Thank you very much. This has been very, very good, very informative.
And likewise. Good to see you, and I look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully sometime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
See you.